Good evening from Rothy's Brosis YouTube channel. This is the KCJC Sports Talk. I am your host, Ken Connell, and my co-host is...
John G.C. Campbell, live and direct from Kingston, Jamaica.
All right,
Yes,
John, good
sir.
seeing you, man. And let's go right into discussing what's trending in sports today.
Well, boy, so many things happening. It's never a cloudy day here. No, I'm telling you. But I want to start with Jamaica Football Federation. They're under some challenges, because they're calling for the freedom to begin training the national squad.
Okay.
Ahead of the upcoming preparatory matches. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, they should have a match against USA on March 25th.
Right.
And so the side has not yet begun to really gel and train. Even though we have, like last week, we spoke about some great prospects, some really great talent. But you know
Mm-hmm.
it goes, if you don't put the talent together and let them gel, then you might as well don't bother. What says you?
Yeah, I read this week that Ricketts with an interview from Sportsmax that he said that he's in communication with at least 10 players from top the first and second division in England, and that some of these players have actually received their passport already, and some have called to inform him of their interest to play for the Jamaican
Right.
squad. So
Very
Jamaica
interesting,
is
eh?
really, beefing up their team for the upcoming World Cup, which is 18 months away.
Yeah.
I was just talking to a friend today. I'm saying to the friend, 18 months for football is not very far away. So of course, I'm excited. I want to see what we're going to bring forward as it relates to the quality of play and so forth. So that's about it. I'm ready, and I'm excited just like anybody else.
But I have to ask the question though. Why is it that suddenly some of these players, like what's his name, Mikael Antonio, who played for
Mhm.
West Ham United, why is it that suddenly these guys want to play for Jamaica? I kind of wondering what's happening here. I mean, they are eligible to play for
Well,
the
Maciel,
England for
well,
England.
Maciel, Maciel, he was selected to the English side before. Not he didn't start, and he's like 30 years old now, and I guess he realized that maybe this is it for him as it relates to playing in the World Cup. I could only think that that's what he's thinking.
I
Some of
am
the other
think,
players, yeah, some of the other players are quite young, and
yeah,
so they have a way to go. But I think that the more you see quality players coming into Jamaica side, the more you're going to see people who are interested in playing for the country, because we do have people who are patriotic, even though some of them were born in England, but they're born to Jamaican parents. Then a lot of these guys would very much like to play for Jamaica team. So if we
interesting.
can get everything together, like the negotiation and so forth, I'm sure we'll be able to attract even better players in the future. And bear in mind that we're ranked 47th in the world, which is not bad ranking considering that we're in the CONCACAF region.
Right. Well, that's interesting. But I want to add quickly to that. Darren Moore, a past reggae boy. I think he played in the latter part of the 1999, if I remember correctly. Darren Moore, a
Mhm.
reggae boy, but he has been appointed manager of Sheffield Wednesday Football Club.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's actually a big move.
Hmm.
Few black players have been allowed to be managers of clubs. When you really check it out. I mean, hey, I'm not pointing fingers here, but certainly for him to be called to as manager for Sheffield Wednesday, I think that's quite an accomplishment. Hopefully, that will open the doors for others to to do likewise.
Yeah, because we've been stressing the same thing about, people not just playing the sports, but using the sports as a
Right,
career. And so
exactly.
we hope that these things are going to open up even more opportunities for other people who
Yeah,
want to pursue the sport in that direction.
absolutely.
So, yeah,
And
there anything else on
well,
football?
well, I just want to encourage the JFF, Jamaica Football Federation, to settle the contractual issues with the this ongoing issue about contract and who must get what. we need to settle that ahead of the upcoming preparatory matches. We don't want to hear that because of unsettled minds, then we didn't get 100%. In fact, I think that is what we're going to be discussing later on with our guests. But let's move on. Anything that from
Yeah,
from your end?
I join hands with you on that one, John. I do believe that that's going to be very critical in how the players perform. You know, remember, not only can it affect them when it comes to performance in one way, but they can also be demotivated, and then as
Absolutely.
such, they don't give 100%. You know, so hopefully this can be settled, and we can move on from there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We need, and the same thing happened in cricket. I wonder what the cricket guys are saying now. I mean, the same thing happened in cricket. It's an interesting thing. The fact that, the lack of, or the promise of, or the unsettlement as it comes on to the finances has affected their mental ability. We're coming back to that.
Definitely.
We're going to come back to that.
Definitely, of course.
All right, anything else on your side?
Yeah, there is one topic that I know I heard you touch on it, and I know you would want to discuss it too. It relates to Caster Semenya, the South African Olympic champion runner, who has appealed to the European Court of Human Rights to end discriminatory testosterone limit imposed on female athletes. You know,
Right.
and Caster Semenya, as most people know, she is hyperandrogeneous, which means that she have a naturally high level of male hormone, sex hormone. And I just want to ask you, what is your take on that? Should an athlete be penalized when this is natural? It's not something that's artificial, it's natural. What's your take on that?
It's always a tough thing question, because let's face it, I'm hoping she's female. I'm saying she's female, okay? Great. She was born with certain attributes. She was born genetically, she was born a certain way. She was created a certain way.
Right.
I think it's somewhat unfair to say to her, because you were born this way naturally, you can't compete with the rest of the human race, in terms of females. I don't know if it's completely fair, but on the other side, I can see where the unfairness comes in, because here is this lady coming to a race charged with testosterone and everything naturally, and beating the whole field. It's one of those things that ethics in sport and so on. I'm still up to my wits' end in terms of how I would deal with that. It requires discussion.
My take on that, I would, until I see something different, I would support any hyperandrogeneous athlete to perform in any athletic event that they want to perform in, because I have to look at it from the point of view of somebody, a male athlete who was born with a high level of ACT-N3 genes, which is the speed gene. Now, do you penalize that person who has a high level of the speed gene also?
Well, there you go. This is one of the things that is ethics, as I say, ethics, and that is what we will have to decide. That we'll have to have a body of persons sit down and discuss this and so on. It's difficult. It's one of those difficult things. But let us but still on track and feel, because I want to touch base on this one.
Before we go to that, John, bear in mind though that they actually did not stop her from perform. They're saying that she have to go on medication to reduce the high level. And I think that it's a little bit of double standard to me, because on one case you said tell the athlete no PED, on the other side you say take some drugs in order to reduce your naturally given hormone by birth. I don't
exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's why I say it's one of those difficult things to deal with. Difficult, boy. What do you say? I'm under drugs. I have to take drugs to perform.
Right.
But I want to move on.
Yes.
Speaking of drugs, I don't know, but you, Mr. Blake, Johan Blake, one of our top sprinters, he came out saying that he will not take the COVID vaccine,
right?
Even if it means missing the Olympics. And I listened to him saying that, and I pondered, and wondered whether or not he was indeed within his right to say that as a national athlete, But what do you think about that?
Well, you know what happened? The thing about it is that I'm assuming that there's freedom of speech in Jamaica also, and I'm sure that somebody maybe who is advocating for the vaccine would definitely say that as an athlete and a role model, he shouldn't have came out and said something to that, because the government is already having struggle trying to convince people who consider this to be a conspiracy theory to take the vaccine. And Jamaica is in a bad situation right now as it relates to the COVID-19 virus. So if you look at it from that point of view, then of course you would say maybe it's not a good thing for him to come out and say that. But on the other hand, my concern is, well, not necessarily a concern. My question to him is, how do you know you're even going to make the team?
Yeah, well,
So I think he is thinking ahead, way ahead of the game, because I am very doubtful that he's even going to make that team unless he start performing a lot better. So
that's another issue. Certainly, we're gonna see how that goes, eh? We will see how that goes. All right. Lastly, before I mention the guest, that we have a very interesting guest. I see we're Chris Gale is going to be playing for the West Indies again in the upcoming T20 series, or has offered himself, should I say, to play. Chris Gale is what? He's 41 or 40 years old now, eh?
Yeah, I know he's in his 40s, early 40s.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure.
but he's saying that I think I respect him for that. He said he doesn't have a problem batting further down the line, like at number 3 or even 4, as long as he gets the chance to to represent his region to the best of his ability. He wants to win this cup, he says, for the region. Very interesting, very, very interesting. Let us see how that goes.
I have to make a step backward, because we have to talk about the outstanding performances of the Jamaican athletes, track and field athletes in the Power 5 conference. For those of us who are viewing, we know that the Power 5 conference is the ACC, the SEC, the Big 10, Big 12, and Pac-12. I'm sorry. Our athletes did so well over the weekend. If you remember on one of our shows, we talk about the number of athletes now that we have in track and field in some of the top conferences in United States of America, and they did an outstanding job over the weekend. I think the Pac-12 championship is this week, because it wasn't held because of COVID. I just got to make mention of two of my favorite athletes, Kevona Davis and Akira Nugent. Kevona, of course, most of our audience would know that she's from Edwin Allen High School, and Akira Nugent is the young hurdler from Excelsior High School. And when Kevona actually got second in both her event, that's the 60 meter and the 200 meter, and both her times were actually personal best or personal record. The winner in both her event was Kennedy Flannel, who is a junior at Texas. So she is 2 years ahead of Kevona Davis. So we have to give credit for this 19-year-old who is performing outstanding. And when you look at her 60 meter, for example, her time was the same as Kennedy Flannel, which was 7.25 seconds. For those of you who know about the sprint, 7.25 seconds is extremely good timing, very good timing. And Kennedy had a 22.55 in the 200 meter, and Kevona had a 22.87 second. So I'm looking for much better performances coming from Kevona Davis when she gets outdoor, because she's definitely not an indoor person. For those of you who might have watched her at Boys and Girls Championship. And Akira Nugent, she was run up in the Big 12. She was second in the 60-meter hurdle with a time of 7.98 seconds, which again is an outstanding time, thinking that you're going over those barriers. So I'm looking forward to see what these Jamaican athletes who are more familiar with the outdoor environment, see how they're going to do when it's time for them to perform outdoor.
Well, talent abounds. We're not short of talent, and we spoke about that on several occasions. So we look forward to good things, this being an Olympic year as well. We look forward to exciting things down the line, you know. All right, good, nicely. I want to introduce our guest. We should have a very robust and interesting discussion with the guest that we have sitting in the waiting room. We often talk about the role of the mind in sports performance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I remember what's his name, Asafa Powell. Sometimes people have mentioned that when the big
I'm glad you did that.
when the big time is here, when the big time comes around, he's like he falters.
I'm glad you went there.
And we wonder sometimes why is it that he falters? But we're gonna discuss that some more because we have Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. All right, so we have with us, and we're going to welcome Dr. Chris Charles to the platform, the Brosis. Welcome to Brosis platform. This is a Russi Past Students Association, basically. And
big up to the Russian.
yes.
Thank you, sir.
Just by way of introduction again, we are so delighted to have with us. And let me use his proper terminologies here, you know, the professor of political and social psychology at the University of the West Indies. Dr. Charles is also a cultural therapist and also a research associate in the psychology department at City University of New York, the Graduate Center. And it's from that same university, he holds a PhD in psychology, same City University of New York. His main interests are sports psychology, criminological psychology, sleep disorders, and I think he actually operates a clinic on sleep disorder. And don't take this a joke, you know. The issue of sleep and quality sleep is a critical one. So yes, there are persons who specialize in ensuring that they can provide the correct therapy for the promotion of sleep. Dr. Charles is one such. His main interests also include pop culture, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about that later on, and sexuality. Dr. Charles he has done some teaching even before UE. He did some teaching in the United States at various universities. He's also the editor of Perspectives on Caribbean Football and also Soccer in the Caribbean and Beyond. He has published over 50 journal articles and book chapter. But we can gladly say that he's here with us tonight to share his insights on our topic for tonight is going to be sports psychology. and because I have the floor, I want to invite you, Dr. Charles. He's a man who tell me I mustn't call him Dr. Charles, call him Charles. But anyway, it will go, you know, just give me some space here. I just want to say to you again, thanks for joining us. Mm-hmm. And just for the audience, because people are listening to you in Canada, people are from the United Kingdom, and we have people in the United States, and certainly from here in Jamaica. What is your role at UE? And before you answer, let me just also introduce you to my co-host, Kenneth, on the corner there. He's listening to us as well.
Dr. Charles, welcome. Welcome to Brosis YouTube channel. We are very excited to have you, and we look forward to learning a lot from you on this forum.
As a member of the Sportz Nation, I'm honored to be on this platform because we rate Russians, we rate the Russians. So big up on yourself.
Thank you, sir. And I like your colors that you have on too, mind you.
All Africa.
All right, so I was saying to you, Dr. Charles, what is your role? What is your role at UE? What is
my primary role at university is an educator. I'm a university lecturer, So I teach in the political science department. I'm a psychologist by training, but I started out in political science at the University of New York, the Graduate Center.
Right.
And you know those times we used to land in New York from those early days. But I got bored with political science and moved over to psychology. So I am trained in political science as well, but I got the PhD in psychology. And so I'm employed to teach political science, and I use a discipline called political psychology, or the psychology of political behavior, where we
Okay.
use psychological science to explain political behavior, action, decisions, events, and outcomes.
Okay, great. Before I turn over to Ken, I just heard you mention something a while ago, and I am moved to ask you. It seems as if psychology has various branches.
Yes.
So
Yeah, man,
just
I mean,
tell me a little bit about that.
all right. I'll go on a little tangent to say something to you, which is not related to sports, but related to our broad psychology. And we all push our discipline, but it is really very broad for our discipline.
Right.
So in the political psychology realm, before I answer your question about the range of subfields in psychology, so I built an election forecast model using political psychology. The first model I used in 2016, I got the election wrong. It was a North American model. It's not the model, it was the forecaster who got it wrong. And so I built an indigenous model looking at macroeconomic data, leadership, and the homicide rate. And the model,
Oh, okay.
the model was able to accurately predict. It has accuracy rate of 92% for election between 1962 and 2020. So I'm just saying to you that psychology is very broad and we use it to predict a range of things. But to answer your question about psychology, in my talks with students at the university, more so psychology students, most of them focus or have an interest in clinical psychology.
Right.
But the majority of people around the world do not have a mental disorder. People have talents they want to enhance, they want to be motivated, they want to understand how to deal with issues and to adjust. So clinical psychology is one of the most popular specialties, but most people around the world do not suffer from mental disorder. So there are a range of subdisciplines, and I have counted 62. You can start with social psychology, personality psychology, psychology and law, forensic psychology.
Right.
That's going to give you a few. Police psychology, military psychology, industrial organizational, biological psychology, cognitive psychology, neuropsychology, critical, political, consumer, sports psychology, media psychology, and so on.
Yeah.
So I have counted about 62
Right.
specialties in discipline of psychology.
Yeah. How popular do you think this field is? How popular is it? Because I want to kind of segue into the issue of sports psychology. What is it really? But how popular is this field?
Globally,
Is it grown? Is it growing? What is it? Go ahead.
It's very popular, not because I'm in it, because a lot of my work is interdisciplinary because problems are never usually in one area. So the problems I look at in Jamaica, like skin bleaching, sports, crime, sexuality, popular culture, the issues, the puzzles that I try to unravel in these areas, I can't use psychology alone. So I draw on anthropology, sociology, history, cultural studies,
Right.
you name it, economics, as I did in the forecasting models and so on.
Right.
So it's a very broad field, and I was trained to give psychology away, meaning that I tend not to publish in psychology journals. The journals that I publish in are non-psychology journals. So I was trained to give psychology away. So people who are not psychologists will read me. The psychologists know what they know already. So most of my work I publish outside of psychology journals. So it is very, very broad. And I mean, I don't know of a country in the world where you can't find a psychologist.
All right, interestingly. Ken, your
Yeah, it's very broad here too, Doc. It's very broad here in America too. But because we are more focused right now on sports,
Mhm.
can you outline for us some of the specialist area in sports psychology, some of the areas that one can specialize in
Well,
as it relates to sports psychology?
Okay, all right. A lot of the sports, let me just say it this way.
perhaps you could, sorry, Charles, perhaps you could say, what is it really though, before you
Yeah,
even get,
man. Yeah, what I
exactly.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So it is really the scientific application of mental skills, training to persons in sports to enhance their performance and to develop their personal and professional skills. So, so it is the scientific application of mental skills, training to persons in sports to enhance their performance and develop these athletes personally and professionally. Because more often than not, when you think of sports psychology or you hear it, you think about performance. But we go beyond that. If the athlete has a relationship problem, right? We address that as well. Personal issues, we address that. If it's like the Premier League, and as I work with Annette Gardens, male Premier League team, 2015-2016, and the one that year, and I work with Barbican female Premier League team for 7 years, and they won all 7 years. I'm not the only person who's important there. The players, the coaches, and the management all
Yeah,
played
certainly, certainly.
significant roles, but in those situations, um, any issue can come up that doesn't necessarily deal with the direct psychology, as in dealing with enhancing performance.
Mhm.
So it might be that the mother of a player was killed. If you're with an inner city Premier League team, and how do you deal with that and so on? Or if if you're on a female team, you will have, if you're recycled for a female team, you will have females who are in same-sex relationships, and they might have problems in that relationship and that impact their performance. And you have to step outside of the cultural biases that you were socialized to have and to hold and to address the issues that they're having.
Mhm. Interestingly, because I was still about to ask you that if you could, as a psychologist and one who has
Mhm.
had some experience in dealing, as you mentioned, Annette Gardens, and I think you mentioned Barbican football, female
The
football
female
squad.
team, 1 year we can.
What are some of these psychological challenges faced by the athlete? And in this case, it's a football. What are some of the key ones? You mentioned a few already, but if you could just go them over again, what are the
All right, so
footballer? What are these
I
challenges?
would call them challenges because every time I go to a team, right? So for example, Arnett, wonderful team, the players, coaching staff, management, always respectful. But the players are suspicious because I'm from a discipline that deal with mental health issues. And I have to say to them, as I said earlier, that the majority of people in the world do not suffer from mental disorders. So psychology is broader than mental health issues or psychological challenges. So we also enhance psychological strengths and psychological virtues. So, but let me answer the question. I think I understand what you want. So some athletes will have performance anxiety. I remember a player, that particular player, once the coach called the player off the bench and say warm up, the player started to shake. You could literally see the player shaking.
Yeah,
Very
interesting.
good player, and a very good player.
So,
And so I would then go to talk with the player to reduce the anxiety. And
Yes.
you can do that by teaching them certain skills. But they would know the skills from before, like self-talk. You can say to yourself, remain calm, right? And every negative thought that comes into your mind, you engage in cognitive restructuring. You replace it with a positive thought. So if you're nervous and you're shaking and the thought says, you know, you're not gonna play well enough.
Yes.
You are trained to replace that negative thought with a positive. I'm going to do well. And if you're shaking, they are trained to start to stretch and to tense and relax each group of muscles, right? Because that loosens them up. And if they're the palpitation, a lot of palpitation going, and they're breathing like that, right? Because of anxiety, we teach them how to breathe properly and how to use centering and to breathe and to control that and to reduce their heart rate and to calm themselves down. There are other things that we use. We can look if they're not shaking, but they're going onto the pitch and they look like there's a ghost, right?
Yeah.
They're looking at you as if you're a ghost, right? Right? You know, and you might see them perspiring. You know, there are several signs.
Yeah,
And
signs.
you might see them tensing up and so on, right? So there are things that we look for. I mean, the example I gave you about the player who was just shaking, that is unusual. So we look for more subtle cues.
And
So
but you know,
that's
because
one thing about performance anxiety.
right.
Quickly before you come in, one more thing. Coaches always say, go out and win. We differ. We don't encourage players to go out and win, or athletes. We say, go out and do your best.
Do your best, right?
Give off your best. If you do your best all the time, you're more likely to win most of the time if you're a good team than if you go out to win and you're not giving your best.
That's a significant difference.
I just
But you know, I wanted to ask, is this where the use of imagery, for instance, of what they call visualization, of mental rehearsal, mental practice, is this part and parcel of what you're suggesting here? And how useful is this, the visualization, the mental rehearsal?
Useful.
And before you answer, I recall, for instance, and you can back me up here, like, for instance, an athlete like Usain Bolt, you see him at the Olympics and people see him doing all kind of strange things and doing that. And to me, in my own little way, untrained way, I am saying that this is his way of calming himself, centering himself, focusing on the task at hand when he does his strange little things and
He has those rituals to calm himself down.
Rituals, that's the word.
He has those rituals that he uses to calm himself down. Unlike, and I'm going to call him name, unlike a surfer who is stiff.
Yep.
Standing up stiff and looking, thinking about his mother.
Different, eh?
Right? So there's a difference.
Different.
So a surfer's coach said a surfer is lazy. But we don't think so. And in Jamaica, you usually have turf war where the coaches separate themselves from the psychiatrist. Not all of them. We're getting better. And the coaches separate themselves from the psychologist and so on. But a surfer, well, at the time I was living in the US and teaching there, a surfer would have done well with some of my colleagues. If some of my colleagues worked with him. Because once we saw both, we knew exactly what he was doing.
Right, exactly.
He was calming himself down.
Yes.
He was controlling the performance climate.
Yes.
That's very tense.
Yes.
Right? So he was reducing his anxiety. And people say, but he's experienced. Yes. But we tell athletes, if the occasion is important and you don't feel some butterflies, a little nervous, something is wrong. Because no matter who we are in our experience we are, once it is an important occasion and a big race, as in the 100-meter sprint, there's going to be some amount of anxiety, even if it's controllable. If you don't feel it, you are not going to do well.
Yeah. But
when you feel it, you have to control it and then take control of the performance environment.
And may I just perhaps could just add that level of anxiety also kind of drives the physiological processes that will provide the energies and the that kind of thrust that you need to perform.
Yeah, definitely. The one I'm talking about is the one that if it's not there, we become suspicious as professionals.
Interesting.
And that drives you as well and it enhances you physiologically. But there's a threshold. If you go beyond that,
then it becomes
you start with rumination, which is the catastrophic thinking. I can't be, I'm going to lose, I'm not so fit. You know, I'm gonna shame Jamaica. You know, when my woman I got think, when my mother I got think, you know, when my friend I'm gonna laugh up on the corner, I'm gonna disappoint my coach. And so you start all these negative ways of thinking, or all these negative ideas start to come into your mind, right? When you pass the threshold in terms of what is permissible in terms of anxiety.
Doc, as I listen to you, Doc, I want to go back a little bit on some of the things that you have said pertaining to when you were working with some of the athletes in Kingston with some of these teams, the suspicion that they had. It seems as if, as it relates to sports with psychology, that your role is really in a form of applied form. It's also in a form of academic form, and it's also the clinical form. Because you say you had to actually teach them that this is not actually something bad. It's something good, right? Because these guys are seeing it as well. We're psycho. That's the reason why they brought this guy inside here, something like that. And I also want to add something to the Usain Bolt section that we spoke about. When Usain Bolt started all of this, people were highly critical of him and felt like he was disrespecting the sport. And before he left the sport, it became popular in the sport for one to calm themselves down by doing different antics before the start of the race. Okay, about Asafa Powell, I totally disagree with his coaches that Asafa Powell is lazy. This guy ran 97 sub 10 in the 100 meter. You can't be lazy and run 97 sub 10 in 100 meter, right? This guy had the world record for a while. You know, he is rated as number 4 of all time in the sprint. I can't see how you can classify a person with all the accolade as lazy.
But I'm talking from I understand what you're saying. I'm coming from a professional distance where we believe that, well, he doesn't have the high school athletic socialization. And that is where you are taught, even if you don't have a psychologist, you're taught to deal with pressure, because if you run a certain way in high school, even Manning Cup, I remember when Johan Blake driven down KC, and the game was about 5 or 6. And the goalkeeper was in our class. And for the entire year, he was teased. So when you're a sports person or an athlete in high school, over time you become tough because underperformance is punished. I mean, brutally so in an aggressive Jamaican culture. Right. But I'm just saying, if Asafa went through champs and did all that training, my suspicion is that he would have done much better internationally. He has done really well.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. Because, you know, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about, like you say, if you are one of your colleagues had work with him, then he would have done much better. Because how can one I want you to kind of use your clinical expertise and explain to me what would you do? Because this guy ran, like I said before, 97 sub 10. And then he never won a major championship, never. Okay. You know, so, you know, looking at an athlete who you see that he has the physical skills, but of course the mental skills wasn't there. What would you do to make him a better athlete?
Before we get into the evaluation, psychological evaluation, we have to be careful. Merlin Ottey, as great as she is, for a long time she ran second, third, and so on. People claim that her competitors were cheating.
Right.
But I remember talking to that famous doctor. He passed on.
Herb Elliott.
Short.
Herb Elliott.
Yes, the great Herb. And he was saying, young man, what are you talking about? This was when I was a student at university. What are you talking about? Do you know the level of competition? So sometimes we have to assess the performance of our athletes against who they're in terms of who they're up against, and not just that they need a psychologist and so on. So I have to put that out there. And also, we are not the coach, so in terms of the actual talent, we are going to have some deficits there because we're not qualified and we're not working with the athlete. But to answer your question, the first thing is to have an extensive evaluation with him, right? About what is happening with him, training, diet, sleep, relationship with parents, relationship with girlfriend, attitude towards the coach, comfort level, and a range of psychological tests I would give him. And why I'm mentioning the test is that very often, because some of us, or most of us, when we enter the team, when they do allow us, the management and the coaches, they don't have time for us to be doing measurements, right, to assess the state of the particular athlete or athletes or the team. They have no time for that. They want to get on with the technical aspect. But I'm saying that when we are contracted seriously, we do a series of measurements based on the psychological evaluation about what the issues are and what needs to be done. So we do that. If you notice, I'm not saying what I would do because I didn't do an evaluation with him. But you would do a range of tests, an extensive interview, and then over time talk to his coaches and so on, observing, and then come up with a treatment plan.
Yeah. But let me ask you this though, Dr. Charles. Because what is being played out here is that the mind can really affect performance.
Definitely.
And performance can also affect the mind.
Well, without going into the philosophy,
certainly,
some people do not separate the brain from the mind. So the mind is the brain, and the brain is an important part of the body. So I was trained in the biopsychosocial model, meaning that the mind is in the body, right? So the organism has a mind, and an organism operates in a social context, right? Okay. So it's a biopsychosocial model. So we do not see a dualism. We do not see dualism. We see a oneness.
Yeah.
So that is why if you're stressed, if your relationship, it affects your performance. That is why if you're not fit, no matter how skilled you are, you're going to underperform. So we do not think of it in terms of a dualism, the mind-body dichotomy. So when we think of performance, we're thinking about a unitary organism, a person, right? Who we have to work on the biological, the technical, and the mental, and the social as well.
But I've been a coach for, like, for instance, some under 16 youngsters at one point, Calabar High School, in fact. And I recall
the wrong school to teach, man.
Well,
stop the interview.
You had to start somewhere for this. but I was about to say to you that
big up Rabalak, big up Rabalak.
all the time, Rabalak. Yeah, but I was saying to you that I recall having this group of youngsters, we're having lost a match to, let's say, a side that was perceived to be a lesser side. It affected the whole mood of the players going into a next match, and you had to do all kind of talking and pampering to get them mind, brain ready again for the task at hand. What is it that really happens here? And remember, they lost us side that was
motivational.
What is it happening here,
Well, motivational,
the psychologist and all of this,
motivational climate, and also pressure from the students, current and the old boys, right? I am from KC, and I can tell you about pressure. I was working with one of the KC Manning Cup team.
Artist.
And the young man, I come back to Calabar, but to show you, and I know the Calabar youngsters go under extreme pressure as well. And it's very difficult for youngsters. You're 15, 16, and old guys coming to your parents, calling you. It's a lot of pressure. So I was talking to the youngster, and he said to me, we haven't won Manning Cup for 25 years. And I said, how old are you? He said 14. He said, you're a 14-year-old, and you win Manning Cup for 25 years. How you do that? How you so great? So you played Manning Cup before you're born. It's just the old boy and the school community. You know, they put pressure on the athletes, and they keep telling them, right, that my generation failed and we didn't win enough Manning Cup, so they are responsible. And it's the same thing at Calabar. They come under tremendous pressure because of the how highly competitive the school sports is. All right, but with those youngsters, you see motivational climate, very, very important. Where you train the youngsters now to compete with themselves. And when we talk, we sound strange. When we say compete with yourself, you are training each youngster to master the skills that you're imparting and to compete with themselves to get better at these skills each day. And to work as a team, right? Together, having mastered the skills. All right? So when the coach pushes a task orientation, what they are focused on is going out there and executing well and doing their best. So you have to create a task orientation motivational climate. Most coaches in Jamaica, and I suspect that was the case with your youngsters, that you created ego orientation, where you might have said to them, there are 10 matches and we have to win 8 in order to go to the next round. I'm just making this up. And so they were focused on winning and so they're engaging in an ego orientation, they're engaging in social comparison. They were more interested in comparing themselves with their opponent rather than mastering the task in a task orientation where they do their best and execute well and beat the opponent. Because if you master your task and you execute well and you're doing your best, you're very difficult to beat. So one of the problems here, I suspect, was the kind of motivational climate that was created. There are several other things, but I'm just giving this as a possible example of what would have led to this.
I understand clearly. Ken, you're about to say something?
Yeah, some of those, I noticed that certain sports, as a coach, I do some coaching myself, track and field and football, soccer. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that I become more of a psychologist when I'm doing track and field than when I'm doing soccer. Mm-hmm. And that is because I don't know if it has to do with the individuality of the sport or whatever. Mm-hmm. But for instance, something that you brought up, I've always taught my athletes, go out there and try to get a personal record as opposed to go out and try to win. Mm-hmm. Because if you use winning as your only objective, then you're going to be disappointed each time you lose, and then you're going to actually demotivate yourself. Mm-hmm. Also, I've always told my athletes to make sure that when you're running 100 meters, mm-hmm. do not think about it as going from point A to point B. Think about you have 10 seconds to get from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. I noticed that when it gets to soccer now, a lot of coaches, including myself, we go away from being a coach and a little bit of psychologist just also, because we just go out and we focus on the physical skills of the sport, our physical fitness. But yet, based on what I'm hearing from you this early in the presentation, is that mental fitness is of equal importance like physical fitness is. So in order for you to actually get what you're looking for from an athlete, you have to focus on both the physical and the mental at the same time. So, but this is not done in places like a lot in Jamaica because we cannot afford in Jamaica to have like a high school with a sports psychologist. So,
well, I don't know that's so.
That shortcoming.
Yeah, exactly.
No, man. Those of us who are in psychology, we offer ourselves to our alma mater. But most times, if you're a part of the Fortis Nation, our problem is that we're all socialized from first form that we're all great people. We're the greatest individuals that ever walked on the face of the earth. And so when you socialize young boys like that, and we all know that people have different competencies, strengths, and talents, but everybody is great. And so when they become adult males, you're gonna have a range of differences in terms of outcomes professionally, and in terms of talent and competencies and strengths and so on, and virtues. And so what I found, even although when I'm there, I'm told one thing, when I try to interact with the teams, there have been instances where I have not received the support of the coaches, or it's difficult to get them, or they say they will call and they don't. And you get one or two sessions for 10 minutes, and it's really tokenism, and they don't understand what is required. Right. And so I don't, right now, like for me, my alma mater, Kingston College, can't call me because they can't afford me. Because when I was a lecturer, a senior lecturer, they rejected me. Now that I'm a full professor, and any university around the world who's employing me have to take me as a full professor and pay me, they can't afford me. And they can't come tell me about Fortis Nation, right? But my point here is that people are available. Some schools use the psychologist. I remember Miguel Poli called me to say, he heard of me, I was working with Barbican, and he knew Charles Edwards, and that I should come to JC. I was doing some work with Kingston College, and ethically, you can't work with two teams in the same competition.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because you're going to have divided loyalty, and they're not going to trust you. And you can be barred as a psychologist.
Absolutely.
Right? That's professional malpractice. So you do have coaches who understand and embrace you. But by and large, it is still a struggle. And I have a female colleague, a younger female colleague, who is very good. And because she's female, sometimes she's told, okay, we'll pay you $10 for the session. And when she's done, they'll say to her, we only have $3, and so on. Or they didn't remember to bring the check, and so on. So she has worked out her ways and means now to ensure that she's paid before anything happens. But so the lack of professionalism, the lack of understanding of what psychology is and how it can be used to enhance performance in sports is very lacking among some coaches and team management.
Yeah.
And so it undermines the performance of these teams.
Because that's a nice way to segue into this question I want to ask you. Because at what point would you say in an athlete's developmental pathway is sports psychology critical or important? I'm talking about along the way. The kid is now 8, he's 9, he's 10, he's going on to be 25, 26.
Right, so it's very important.
Where along the pathway does it become?
A lot across the lifespan, at all stages. So let me give you an example. If you're training youngsters, 8, 9, they're not only interested in competition, they're also interested in recreation. So you have to structure your training.
Fun.
Yeah, so 40% of it has to be fun, and say 60% technical work. Some coaches will say we do technical work now for 45 minutes, and I give another 45, you just play among yourselves. For youngsters, the fun element is very important. And if you don't realize that as a coach and you don't have the psychology with you, and there are certain things there are certain, with children, they are in need of care and protection. And you can treat them as you would adults. And so there are some developmental issues and some things that you have to do with children that you're not going to do with adults and you're not going to do with adult players or athletes. So you're really needed across the athlete's lifespan in the sport.
The critical thing
Because there are critical issues at every stage.
Right, absolutely, because
while I was doing a little bit of research on your area, Doc, I came across something that we did in coaching that's called a celestial map of sports skills, and I was trying to see the level of importance that sports psychology actually plays in sport. And they break down the skills. They talk about technical skill, that's psychology right there. They talk about
technical skill is the actual
more physical. I'm sorry, that would be more the coach's skill. I'm sorry about that. But tactical skill also would be the coaches also. And then but we go to like character and mental skill. That's strictly the psychologist's role. And when I look at this, all of this intertwined, whether you're dealing with tactical or physical or technical, they're all intertwined. So that kind of brought to my attention how critical the role of sports psychology is. That's why you see I was nodding my head in agreement with you when you said from the earliest stage of starting to train an athlete, they require sports psychology. And so you guys have a huge job ahead of you, I think. If I'm wrong, correct me. In Jamaica.
Yeah, we do.
Educate some of the
not because the coaches don't like us or they don't hate us. They don't understand.
That's what I'm saying. So I was going to say you guys have
also some do not believe that it is important.
Right.
Or can really help them. So we have a lot of work to do. So let me give you a joke. My colleague, consultant psychiatrist, Jeffrey Walcott, he played for Clarendon College in the 90s. So we were at the office one day and he said, Charlie, come with me to Clarendon College. I'm working with the football team. So we went and we did cultural therapy. It was another ball game. It's not unique to Jamaica, but in the Jamaican context, it was pioneered by one of our mentors, the late Freddie Clinton, who used dance, drama, singing, drumming, poetry to heal and to transform patients with mental disorders at Bellevue Hospital in the 1970s.
Very interesting.
So he has more of that now into school and into using it to enhance performance among athletes. So Dr. Walcott and I went to CC and we did a session with them, right? And I'm just giving you some basics. It doesn't go in this order. So you have a discussion and when you're talking, you write down what they're saying, right? And then you're actually creating a poem out of the issues that they raise. And they recite the poem together. You can, for argument's sake, have someone DJ the poem. You can have someone sing it, and you can have the percussionist playing. So the issues that they raise, we use to create creative pieces and poetics. And poetry is one form. It could have been a skit, right? It could be a dance. It could be a piece of artwork that they have these words and they say, what do these words really mean? And someone goes and, paint it. And the group say, yes, that image is that captures what we're saying. I'm being a little bit trivial, but I'm trying to be as simple as possible. But you use the creative arts to enter the psyche of the players as a group and resolve the issues they're having. So that Clarendon College team, in that year, they were having team problems in terms of cohesion. Right, and we did 2 sessions, right? And then there was a follow-up session, but I was in West Africa at the time. So I called the psychiatrist and said, everything's okay. And we spoke, and he did the review session, right? And I suspected that they were going to meet my alma mater in Oliver Shield. So I sent a message to my KC friends in my year group to say that I'm working with Clarendon College, and if KC meets Clarendon College is going to beat them, because we are confident in our tools. And in that Oliver Shield, Clarendon College got one chance and scored. I think the first match in Clarendon drew, and then they came to Kingston and they got one chance and they scored. And I knew that they were going to win because of the kind of work we did with them, and they were more cohesive. So look at them more cohesive than KC, because at the time, KC's strategy was to have the youngsters play chess.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So how KC functions, if someone is powerful and the person is a chess player, he just comes and says, chess is what the team needs. So as a psychologist, we're not going to quarrel and jump in, because that will divide the team and create contention. So how we operate at all times is to ensure that there is peace and calm in the camp. Right. And if that means walking away, we will, because there are others who are waiting to use our skills.
Yeah. But there's no doubt then that sport has, well, the psychological development in terms of the impact of sport on the psychological development, especially of the young athlete.
Yeah.
I recall this concept called sport for development.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do, they use sport as a tool to promote and to develop and to nurture what they call social skills, character, tolerance, being able to accept loss as well as being able to handle triumphs, acceptance, and so they teach
those things are simple, for us.
All these things through sport, using sport to do all of that. And I found that most interesting.
Remember, be careful, because from where I was raised, in the belly of the beast, in Kingston and St. Anne's, in Kingston 13 and Kingston 11, enough ball are gunman. Right? And some of them today are still gunmen. And I can say that, I'm not afraid. I still have a war. And so it is useful as a tool to teach certain skills as in development, but we have to be careful. Because if you come with certain dysfunctions, the participation by itself can't help you.
Right.
But we acknowledge that teamwork, negotiation, communication, working together, all those things you will learn, but they by themselves, right? If you are from a dysfunctional family, a vulnerable family, and they are mistreating you, and they are abusing you physically and brutally socializing you into becoming a murderer, football by itself will not save you. So we recognize the importance of the skills that are learned, but we have to be careful.
Yeah, I'm looking at an athlete that me and my friend was talking about, Johan Blake, when he sustained that injury years ago. And I said to my friend, it's one thing that he recovered physically 100%, but is he going to recover 100% mentally? No, I don't know if you know a lot about Johan Blake, but what's your assessment on Johan Blake, for instance? Why he haven't, even though he has recovered 100%, yet he haven't been able to get back to the level of performance that he was before?
So fortunately, in political psychology, we can do a lot of things. We can measure the personality of politicians and leaders from a distance. But we don't do such from a distance measures in sports psychology. I'd have to speak with him.
Okay.
And I'd have to do so in in a professional way. So if he's my client, then I would do the evaluation, then we work together on a treatment plan. So I really don't know what the issues are. I have my suspicions. If people say to me that, oh, he was injured and he hasn't recovered, I don't know. But if that is so, what we do know in sports psychology, when a star athlete is injured, the psychologist is required.
Yeah.
That's where I was going.
Well, because
any athlete.
Some of my colleagues listening now, I'm sure they are laughing because the psychologist is needed before. Because if you don't train properly and you don't rest when you need to, and you are stressed and you're overworked, you're going to damage yourself. Right? So that's one. So you need a psychologist to remind you of some things about what the do's are, what the do's and don'ts are in terms of training and your regimen. It's very important because overwork and stress, athlete, the track star pulls the football damages his knee or his ankle, all kind of problems, right? So psychologist has to work from before injury. But when there's injury, unfortunately, there's the fear among the athletes that they're going to be injured again.
Oh yeah.
And the team needs them. And they don't want to be injured. So they approach the game tentatively. And the fear of being injured again causes them to underperform because they are preoccupied with worry about being injured again. So there are ways to get the athlete to refocus and to understand that, look, how many times you have been injured in your career? A few times, right? So why do you think that that injury is around the corner? I mean, I'm just saying it this way, but this is not necessarily how I would do it in a therapeutic relationship, right? But it's a close alliance if it's a one-on-one, if you're working with a sprinter. But there are ways to reach the athlete and get the athlete to stop being afraid. So if it's football or soccer, they are tentative about tackling. If you're a center forward, you're running away from the central defender. You're afraid to be injured. And so we have to work the athlete or the player through those problems.
What I'm sensing here as you speak there is certainly the role of sports psychology in injury rehabilitation. But it leads me to believe or to think that, the injured athlete, for instance, has to put trust in the rehab specialist or the person who is dealing with their rehabilitation process.
All right.
So speaking from my personal experience, for instance, I've had athletes before who have come to me, was injured some time ago, went to a rehab specialist, and for some strange reason wasn't doing well. The athlete was referred to us, and we took that athlete, and after that time, the athlete did well.
Yeah.
When you speak to the athlete, you hear things like wasn't sure what the other person was doing, never trust the person, little things like that comes out. So again, it just points to the importance of one in terms of the education, information, the trust between the rehab specialist and the athlete, and all this, and how it plays on the mind. It's not anything different today, not much different, but
there has to be trust and respect, and the psychologist has to be a part of the treatment team.
Yes, I can see that.
So, for example, the same visualization that you had asked about earlier, that we call guided imagery.
Yeah.
Right? And the athlete is injured and he's supposed to be doing some exercise with the physiotherapist, the sports medicine physician, and so on. But he also needs a psychologist because some of the techniques that he's slowly relearning or going over, he or she can visualize them. So the athlete is resting, physically, right? But he's visualizing the maneuver, visualizing the strategy, visualizing the technique, right? And you might see the athlete who is in the know. You might see the athlete on the track with the cast. On the field, it is because the best place to practice your visualization is in the actual setting in which you're going to perform.
Yeah.
And so, one, let's say you are supposed to do some exercises. You can do them, but you can also visualize those exercises as well after you've done the physical exercises. And the visualization also helps. So there are studies that have shown that the visualization, in addition to the physical exercise, if you visualize those exercises, two, it helps in terms of recovery.
Right.
And also, because you're not sufficiently well, you can, while you're healing physically, you can rehearse the strategy, technique, tactics, and skills and maneuvers visually. You can use guided imagery to practice without moving a muscle.
As you mentioned that, I and excuse my ignorance, but I remember some time ago I'd see some of the athletes too, with earphones.
Mm.
And as far as I was concerned, listening to rap music or listening to whatever.
No,
but
man.
I learned subsequently that sometimes they're doing some mental rehearsal thing going on there. It's not necessarily, it could be music, but sometimes it's just words being repeated over and over and our technique. Amazing. I didn't realize that until.
Yes. All right. And what a lot of them doing is they're listening to music to calm them down. Right? Because they don't need a tape, because we tell them self-talk is internal or external. Females tend to use external self-talk. Right where the self-talk now is when you talk to yourself. So, and you use self-talk to instruct yourself. So what the coach teaches you, you tell it to yourself. You instruct yourself. So you can use it also to calm yourself down, remain calm, and to repeat the instruction to yourself. So you instruct yourself, and also to motivate yourself. So sometimes when those who don't have earphones and so on, you might see them closing their eyes and they're mumbling, or they're walking and mumbling. Right. They're repeating the instruction. And if they're nervous, they're saying, remain calm, remain calm. Professor Charles told me to repeat this.
So, Doc, this seems like it's a very complex area, I see, but I'm sure some of our listeners would want to know what kind of qualification does one need to become a clinical sports psychologist? What sort of qualification?
All right. I'm glad you said clinical sports psychologist.
Right.
All right. So that's one form of sports psychologist. Right? So I do it from the applied side. Right?
Okay.
So I got clinical training at Harlem General when I didn't abandon my program, but I got a letter from my supervisor and I went to Harlem General for 2 years. And then I came with Freddie Kling for several years. And so I honed my clinical skills. Like if you're a doctor, you learn it down at KPH, right? So I went to Harlem General, but I was trained in social and personality originally. And why am I mentioning this? Because the field of sports psychology, right, is specialized. And there are people who are training sports psychology, right? They do the physiology, they do the sports, sociology, they do all the things that I'm telling you about in their degree. A lot of us in psychology in the Caribbean and Jamaica, in particular, and even among psychiatrists, we come to sports psychology with the skills and we hone them over time. So you have people from psychiatry, counseling psychology, you have people from social work, you have people from social and personal psychology, you have people from organizational psychology coming. So a lot of people from different areas of psychology come into sports psychology, right? And hone their skills. But in the US, and in Jamaica, I'll come back to Jamaica, but in the US, you have to be certified, pass exams and get a license. to be a licensed sports psychologist.
Right.
In Jamaica, you have to be licensed as well with the Jamaica Psychological Society.
Right. Right.
So what my other question is, what level of qualification do you need? Do you have to have a master's degree, a PhD in order to get a good paying job? And my other part of the question is, what is the salary like as it relates? Because I'm sure some people want to know this, because this is a very interesting field from what I see so far.
So, all right. Well, we understand in psychology that you're not really a psychologist unless you have a PhD.
Okay.
And then you're not a licensed psychologist until whichever jurisdiction you're in, you pass the relevant, apart from your university degrees, you pass the relevant exams and you're licensed.
Okay.
So you do have that. In the case of Jamaica, you do have a lot of master's level psychology, and we welcome them because we also at one time had masters. So we welcome them, but we encourage them when they're practicing and they have a license, right? Right, that they work, that they're supposed to work with a licensed PhD level psychologist. Most tend not to want to do that, but that's what we encourage because you want the person with the best training and the highest level training to the highest, to be there to ensure that the athlete gets the best advice and the best training and the best guidance.
Interesting.
I have to ask this
question. So we do have master's level psychologists.
Okay.
But the rule of thumb internationally is that even with a license, they ought to be working with or supervised by a PhD level licensed psychologist. And it's not only clinical. Remember, I'm saying that you can come from health psychology.
Right.
You can come from counseling psychology. You can come from clinical. You can come from social and personality. You can come from other areas of psychology. And that is different from you being trained directly in sports psychology because there are those PhDs available.
Okay.
So
you asked about money. If it's money, Jamaica is not the space for that. But I know my colleague who I have the greatest respect for, Scott Hamilton, we were trying to get him to come to the University of the West Indies, but his university offered him much more than we could give him. He worked with MB and players. And so in Europe and North America, if you're a sports psychologist and you're licensed, you can do very well for yourself in terms of salary and financial.
Good. So then I have to make sure I ask this question. It seems like from what I'm seeing right now and understanding how the sports world is right now, it seems like there is an increasing demand for this field. So how do
Not in Jamaica.
Pardon me?
Not in Jamaica.
Okay. All right. So here in America, I'm looking at, for example, I think there'll be an increase in the demand. But let's think about Jamaica now that we're faced with the coronavirus. How do you think the coronavirus will impact the demand for specialists like yours?
Well, there's no competition, right? There tend not to be. I mean, there are some competitions now they're thinking about, starting up and so on. So if there's no competition, there's no work for you to do. But if you have athletes who might say, oh, I'm not taking the vaccine, so I'm going to miss the Olympics, and it might be the last year, that athlete might want to consult with you about preparation to transition into the non-athletic world, into retirement, because it's very difficult for many athletes. You're a star, you're well known, you're in the spotlight, and once you retire, your identity, your sport identity, your sense of self, if you're strong, collapses. And some professional athletes, when they retire, have difficulty adjusting to retirement. And so, even though they're not competing, in this particular case, they can secure your services to prepare them for retirement. Also, you do have athletes who are training. You have footballers who still juggle, still dribble, watch videos, train, work out. If they have the resources or they have a sponsor, they can employ you and you guide them through what they would normally get in a regular season. You can do it online too. You can consult online, but there are certain protocols that you have to follow. So, for example, if you're not licensed in the United States, it's tricky if you're in Jamaica and you don't have a license. You might have, for example, a Florida license. But if the Florida license is not reciprocal in the state of New York and the athlete is in New York, you're violating New York laws because your client is in New York and you're using the technology to offer services. Although you're competent in Jamaica, you may be licensed in Florida as well, you're not in New York. And so there are legal issues. Also, there are issues that you have to think about in going online, the safety of your platform, because you have to guarantee your clients anonymity and confidentiality, and to ensure that when they're talking, no one knows, because even among athletes, many Jamaicans still do not want anyone to know that they're a senior psychologist, because the default understanding is they're wacko, they're crazy.
Wow.
Gonna lose it.
Well, I guess that's the reason why we have this program, because we're trying to educate people on how various careers benefit you in sports. Because from what I got from you, in order for you to get the full potential out of your athlete, you have to focus on not just physical fitness, but you have to focus on mental fitness equally.
But remember now, in Jamaica, we don't get it yet. The psychology is supposed to be part of the team, with the coach, the assistant coach, the physio, the trainer, the goalkeeper. Let's say it's a soccer team, the goalkeeper coach, the nutritionist, right? The medical doctor. But what I do know, you don't have such an integrated team anywhere in the Caribbean. If there's such an integrated team, my colleagues, when you hear, you know how to find me, please send information. But we tend not to have integrated teams in terms of coach, management, nutritionist, physiotherapist, sports medicine doctor.
My final question, me and John we're talking about the Jamaican football team.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the problems that I've always seen among the players in Jamaica is they have the motivation is not always there, and the discipline.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you do for them? Let me ask you that. What other clinician, what can you do for the Jamaican team? Because we're supposed to be getting a real good group of guys coming from from England. So I've seen several times where guys' behavior is like a kid on the field, and this impacts
not English
tremendously. What can you do for them?
Okay, let me just say this. I'll make an additional point related to the last point, and then I'll answer your question. There is no integrated team in sports here, as I explained. And most of what I observe is that the doctor comes, the nutritionist comes when they're going to play a competition overseas, or when they're injured, seriously injured. In a professional outfit or semi-professional, everybody's there all the time and they work together.
Right.
Okay, you talk about lack of motivation. You talk about discipline. The indiscipline can be challenged, or as my late mentor Frederick would say, you can engage in confrontation. It's a clinical term, not a physical one.
Right.
Right. But I'm not going to go into that. But what I would say is that Motivation is the intensity and direction of effort. And you have intrinsic motivation, which is motivation that comes from inside, where you love the sport.
The best one.
Yeah, man, you love the sport. No, the intrinsic is also important, but the intrinsic is very, very important. So that is what my motivation for psychology, for university teaching, for research is intrinsic. That's why I was able to apply for full professor after 4 years of arriving in Jamaica, because I love what I do and I'm intrinsically motivated. I remember when I went to Harlem General, I didn't go there to earn any money. I go there, right? I went there at the time and just to learn, to get the clinical skills. And then my supervisor was impressed and she wanted to employ me. And I didn't want to take the money because immediately I didn't enjoy external reward, right? So a lot of the players, they are poor, they're experiencing intense material deprivation, right? They're hard, they can make ends meet. And so their survival is at stake. So we do not provide sufficient external motivation, right? Also, they might have competing goals. They might be a father and they're not working and they're not getting enough from the club. And the mother of the child, their baby mother or partner is the only one who's working. And they're supposed to be staying with the child that day. And they have to be at training. And if you're a father, you have the paternal instinct. Your mind is going to be with the child, right? So you want to be there, but you also want to play for your country, right? So you have these conflicting goals that can be a part of it. Lack of intrinsic motivation, insufficient rewards and extrinsic or external motivation and reward, external rewards, so to speak, and benefits. Also, the lack of transparency and procedural justice. How some teams, so for example, I know some of the people will be upset with me, but I like him, Wanda, the late Prime Minister Edward Seaga. Part of the problem that Tivoli had, he always wanted to be involved in picking a team, right? And some of the coaches couldn't deal with that, so they left. It wasn't a bad thing. He loved the game and he felt that he understood it and he could assist. And as a national icon and one of the earliest people in the independence movement, well, the later independence movement, because it was Bustamante and NW. So, he would always interfere. So I'm using this example, and I'm not disrespecting because I admire him. But I'm using this example to say, when you are powerful, as in a politician, and you interfere in the team selection, sometimes you think a youngster is talented more than someone who the coach thinks is more talented. And if the MP supersedes the coach, the player who was bypassed, who's the better player, will realize there's an absence of procedural justice. The procedure was unfair. And that can demotivate the player.
Yeah. And the coach.
Well, they tend to leave when you have those. It's not only the one done, Other MPs used to do it.
Yeah. But I want to ask you this, because just listening to you, and what jumps out at me was the issue of personality in sport. And we know of the work of the Carl Youngs and Mr. Pride and all these guys. We have glanced at some information from them. But would you say, though, that certain personalities are more suited, for instance, to certain sport? There are certain sport that requires intense aggression. There are other sport that require perhaps
Which one requires aggression?
I'm sorry?
Which one requires aggression?
Well, like that one that I don't even understand. What's it called? American football. Is it called American football? Not.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's an aggressive sport, whether you like it or not. You know, whereas if you're into rifle shooting, you know, you need to be calm. Would you say that personality sometimes should dictate what sport you go to, or could you just train yourself to fit into whatever sport you choose? You know, would you say what?
All right. So personality really is your unique personal characteristics or traits
Correct.
that is relatively stable across time and situation that you inherit genetically and you acquire from your environment. So we talk about traits, we're not talking about character now. When we say characteristics, we're talking about personality traits, intelligence, whether one is introverted or extroverted, whether one is conscientious, whether one has an openness to experience and so on. So there are these characteristics. So for example, if you're an athlete and you're conscientious, you're going to be a good link man.
Mm.
If you have an openness to experience, you're willing to learn and to acquire and absorb all you can, and you're eager to learn and to learn new things. You have an openness to experience. You're going to do much better as a player than one who is not so open to experience. If you're an introvert versus an extrovert, the extrovert will do much better because it's not so much that the introvert wants to be alone or is afraid of people. What we say psychologically is that the introvert do not like a lot of social stimulation all at once. But when you're on the field, whether it's a school game or a local competition or a national level or the regional level, once you're playing, it's a lot of social stimulation. And so extroverted players will thrive much better in those situations. However, that doesn't always put the introverted player at a disadvantage because you have introverted players who will rise to the occasion and play exceptionally well.
Right.
It's just that because they had so much social stimulation, they crash when they go home. They don't want to go anywhere else. They feel tired, not just from the physical exertion, from the social stimulation, they're overwhelmed. And so they go home and go to sleep. They want to recharge. Whereas the extroverted player might want to go on the town after the game. That itself is a disadvantage because there's training tomorrow morning.
John, do we have anybody from the audience engaging with us by way of questions or comments?
Well, one person just said, I am loving the conversation. And yeah, another person says, hi, looking good. Yes. So, yeah, but no questions of sorts. But yeah, I'm really interested in this section here, about personality.
Yeah, so, yeah. It's important, but I'm saying while the extroverted player will have an advantage, there are some advantages that come with being an introvert. You know you don't like a lot of social stimulation. You're more likely to be nervous. So you're going to draw on the psychologist and learn the skills. And because you know you're an introvert and you want your team to do well, if you're trained well and you take your craft seriously, you're going to give your all.
And that's why I asked you if.
So it depends on the situation. Right? It's very, very so. We know as behavioral scientists that behavior comes from your personal characteristics, your interaction with the situation. So it's not just the personal that just move from the characteristics to the behavior. It is filtered by the situation. The situation determines how the person behaves. So when we talk about personality, it lies behind behavior, but it's a behavior or performance is in relation to personality Performance is a function of the interaction between personality and the game situation.
Nature versus nurture. But
No,
We have listeners
that's
from
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
right.
we have listeners from all over the world, but
Because remember now,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
remember now that part of personality is social and part is biological. But
Right.
I'm saying in terms of the behavior of the athlete or the player, how he or she behaves, not just his or her personality. It is how that personality interacts with the game situation that the athlete or the player is facing.
Correct. Yeah, I got that. Correct.
So my question to you is that my primary concern right now is Jamaican sports in Jamaica.
Yes.
What can be done from your clinical perspective to change the perception of the minds of athletes in Jamaica as it relates to sports psychology?
We don't need to change anybody's mind. We need to lobby the powers that be and the policymakers so we move sports from a way of life to a business of life.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it's a policy decision, you know. When we are serious about sports and we move from a way of life to a business of life, then you will have your integrated team, all the members, including the sports psychologist or psychiatrist, and your nutritionist, your physiotherapist, your nurse, your doctor, everybody, your chef, because you need to know what the nutritional needs are for athletes in that particular sport. There may be persons on the team who have dietary needs or certain illnesses that require a certain kind of nutrition. So you have that integrated team, including the coach and the management. Right. And you structure the sport where you start at the early developmental level. And so you get your athletes at each level to be competing at the comparable level internationally. And you have the appropriate governance structure.
Right.
You can only do that if we decide as a country to move sports from a way of life to a business of life.
And we have been trying on our program to do that because we have had many discussion about considering sports as an investment in oneself and to move it into a form of business or move it into a career. So we, even before you came on, me and John was discussing that. And so I totally agree with you on that. And I'm glad I asked that question.
All right, you remember when I defined sports psychology, I spoke about teaching, giving athletes the mental skills to enhance performance, but we also spoke about personal and professional development. So the role of the sports psychologist or psychiatrist is also to address the development needs and the psychological needs of the player or athlete.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Most of what we have spoken about today is really giving them mental skills. We have to give them life skills. We have to give them personal skills, social skills, professional skills, retirement skills.
So politely, can that be your next paper that you're going to write about making sports a business?
All right, the editions that when John Campbell read my bio and he said I'm the editor of Perspectives on Caribbean Football, that's actually a book, an edited book that I'm the editor for, and I'm editor of the book. And I had a football conference at UWI in 2014. We invited JFF, no one showed up. But we had the conference and we published the papers. In the second conference in 2016, we got Captain Burrell to come. He was our keynote speaker, and he gave us permission to use his speech in the foreword. And the book is being shipped to Jamaica now. It's an edited book. The second one called Football in the Caribbean and Beyond, Progress and Challenges. And my work with Arnett Gardens and Barbican female and Arnett Gardens male Premier League teams, my work with those two teams, there's a chapter on it. in the book. There's a chapter on that in the book. And also the late Freddie Kling and my colleague, consultant psychiatrist, Jeffrey Walcott.
Right.
Both of them, they have a chapter on the work they did with Clarendon College before I worked with Jeffrey 1 year with the team.
Excellent, excellent.
And we have, people doing different chapters on different issues in relation to football.
All right, well, we're going to have to wrap up soon, but I want to ask you one last thing in terms of outlook. So do you think that eventually we, in terms of our sports setting and sports arrangement, insofar as teams and so on is concerned, do you think we'd be moving towards having a team of professionals as part of the workings of a club, for instance, the physio, the doctor, the nutritionist, the sports psychologist?
We still have biases.
Do you sense we're moving towards that? Do you sense we're moving towards that?
No matter how you have a Usain Bolt and a Alan Skillicole or a Ricardo Gardner, maybe the average Jamaican parent still believes that if you decide that you want to be a singer or a musician or a sports person, that you're unambitious and you're worthless. And teachers still treat athletes with disrespect as if they are nothing. And sometimes why you find some of our athletes to be poor academically, it is because whatever challenge they had very early, they were ignored by the school system and they chose sport as a way to survive. And they got good at it.
Right. Absolutely. Very important thing you just mentioned here.
Right. So we, to move forward, have to shift our orientation, our worldview, where when we look at our children and they have selected their path, that we guide them and we give them the best tools and skills and strategies and knowledge set to succeed along that path.
Well said, sir. Well said. Well said. I think on that note, we perhaps should bring our most delightful discussion to a close, Ken.
Yes.
So yes, any last words, Ken? You want to tell us about subscribe and all this before I
just want to say, I just want to acknowledge the people who are behind the scene making this show successful, or technical director who is now in Parkinson, or President Troy Malcolm, and the person who is so responsible for marketing, Carleen Stewart. Just want to say a big thank you to all three of them.
Norwin.
And I want to say thanks to our audience who have been subscribing to the Brosis YouTube channel. I mean, the Brosis YouTube channel. We want to ask you to continue to like, share, and subscribe to the program. And Doc, thanks a million for showing up to this forum. We learned so much from you, and we hope that I see that you're very energetic, and I can see you have a passion for what's going on with sports in Jamaica. I hope that you'll continue to let this passion grow and that you will transform the whole era of sports in Jamaica to what we
I have a passion for several things. I get in trouble all the time. I also speak on what can be done to curb the homicide rate in Jamaica.
Homicide rate, wow. I hope sport is part of that. I hope the sport
the governors on both sides tend not to want to listen to us. So we'll make our exit back to North America one day soon. Because
I want to thank Professor of Political and Social Psychology at the University of the West Indies, Dr.
Please come back and talk to us again.
Anytime, just let me know in time.
Yes, thank you so much, sir.
I am delighted. It was good to be here.
Thank you so much. All the best to you.
Thanks for having me. Take care,
listening audience, as usual, happy Friday Eve and good night.
Ciao.